At their lavish 10th anniversary gala, Claire Mitchell stood in her champagne silk gown beside her husband David, a quiet accountant she'd grown to resent for his modest life, completely unaware that this unassuming man was the secret multi-billionaire who owned Mitchell Global Enterprises, the very company where her lover Bradley worked as a senior executive. She'd spent months planning this moment, her heart racing as she prepared to announce her divorce in front of 200 guests and reveal she was leaving David to marry Bradley, his devoted best friend since college, the man who truly understood her need for luxury and status. But what Claire didn't know as she reached for the microphone would shatter everything. David had known about the affair for 6 months, had orchestrated every moment of Bradley's career advancement, and had planned something for this anniversary gala that would crush her forever in ways she never imagined possible. Who was David Mitchell really, and why had he hidden his billions from his own wife? What did Bradley truly know about the man whose company signed his paychecks? And why had David's best friend betrayed him? And what devastation had David orchestrated for this glittering anniversary celebration that would leave Claire destroyed beyond repair? The crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the ballroom of the Belmont Grand Hotel as Claire Mitchell checked her reflection one final time. The champagne silk gown hugged her curves perfectly. The diamond bracelet Bradley had given her, though she'd told David it was costume jewelry, glinted under the lights. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the small index cards containing the speech that would end her marriage. "You look beautiful," David said softly, appearing beside her in his simple charcoal suit. His eyes, those gentle brown eyes she'd once loved, held something she couldn't quite read tonight. "Thank you," Claire replied coolly, barely glancing at him. 10 years she'd wasted with this man who'd promised her the world, but delivered only a modest 3-bedroom house in the suburbs and yearly vacations to domestic destinations. She thought of Bradley, handsome, successful Bradley with his corner office and his promises of penthouses and European getaways. David reached for her hand. "Claire, before everyone arrives, I need to tell you something." "David, please." She pulled away. "I have things to prepare. This is an important night." "Yes," he said quietly, something almost sad crossing his features. "It certainly is." Claire watched him walk away, his shoulders slightly hunched in that way that irritated her. How had she ever thought he was enough? She remembered their wedding day, how she'd believed his promises that his accounting career would flourish, that they'd build an empire together. Instead, he came home every night at 6:30, ate dinner, read books, and seemed perfectly content with their mediocre existence. Her phone buzzed. Bradley's text made her smile. "Tonight, baby, tonight you finally break free. My penthouse is waiting." She'd met Bradley 2 years ago at David's company picnic. David had introduced them himself, completely oblivious. "Claire, this is Bradley Chen, my best friend from Princeton. He just joined my firm." Bradley's firm handshake had lingered. His blue eyes had locked with hers, and something electric had passed between them. "Your firm?" she'd asked David later. "Well, the firm I work for," David had corrected with that modest smile. "Mitchell Global Enterprises." The coincidence of the shared last name hadn't registered then. Why would it? David was just an accountant there, one of hundreds. Bradley had explained it to her months later when their affair had begun in earnest. "It's just chance, babe. Lots of Mitchells in the world. Your husband happens to have the same name as the owner, but trust me, David's just a number cruncher in the finance department. I've actually met the real owner a few times. Total recluse, never shows his face, runs everything through intermediaries." Now, as guests began arriving in their evening finery, Claire positioned herself by the entrance, greeting old friends, David's colleagues, her own circle of increasingly distant acquaintances. Everyone complimented the venue, the decorations, the extravagance of it all. "David really outdid himself this year," someone commented. Claire forced a smile. David hadn't done anything. She'd planned this entire gala herself, though she'd been surprised when he'd simply nodded and told her to spare no expense, that he'd handle all the bills. Probably going into debt, she thought with disgust. One final hurrah before she destroyed him. Bradley arrived fashionably late, devastatingly handsome in his custom Tom Ford tuxedo. He greeted David warmly, clapping him on the shoulder with practiced ease. 10 years, my friend. Congratulations. David smiled that infuriatingly calm smile. Thank you, Bradley. Though I suspect congratulations will mean something different by the end of tonight. Claire's heart skipped. Did he know? But no. Bradley squeezed her hand discreetly as they passed, and David simply moved on to greet other guests, that same peaceful expression on his face. The dinner portion of the evening proceeded flawlessly. Claire barely tasted the filet mignon, her mind racing through her speech. She'd practiced it 100 times, dignified but firm. She would expose David's inadequacies, his failures to provide the life she deserved, and announce her intention to divorce him. Then, in a move she knew would hurt him most, she'd reveal her relationship with Bradley, his best friend, his Princeton roommate, the man he'd trusted above all others. As dessert plates were cleared, David stood and tapped his champagne glass. The room fell silent. Thank you all for being here tonight, he began, his voice steady and clear. 10 years ago, I married the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. Claire walked down that aisle, and I promised her the world. Claire felt her chest tighten. Here it came, the sentimental speech, the public profession of love that would make her announcement even more dramatic. I've spent our entire marriage keeping a secret from my wife, David continued, and Claire's eyes widened slightly. A secret I maintained because I wanted to know something crucial. Did she love me for who I was, or for what I could provide? Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Claire's hands gripped her napkin. What was he doing? Claire, you've complained often about our modest house, our simple vacations, our quiet life. You've made it clear, especially in recent months, that I haven't lived up to your expectations. David's eyes found hers across the room, and for the first time, she saw something steely in them. You've been planning to divorce me tonight, haven't you? To announce in front of all these people that I'm not enough for you? The room gasped. Claire's face flushed hot. How did he know? And you were going to reveal your affair with Bradley, David continued calmly. My best friend, the man I've known since we were 18 years old. Bradley's face had gone pale. He started to stand, but two large men in dark suits appeared beside him, hands on his shoulders, pressing him back into his seat. Let me save you the trouble of your speech, Claire. David pressed a button on a small remote, and the large screens positioned around the ballroom flickered to life. Documents appeared. Corporate filings, ownership papers, photographs. Mitchell Global Enterprises, the company where Bradley works as a senior executive. The company whose paychecks he's been cashing for 3 years. The company he told you was just coincidentally named Mitchell. Claire's blood ran cold as the documents zoomed in, showing a signature. David Mitchell, founder and CEO. I'm not an accountant, Claire. I'm the owner. I built Mitchell Global from nothing while we were engaged. When we married, I was already worth $300 million. Today, I'm worth $8 billion. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Claire couldn't breathe. This couldn't be real. $8 billion, David repeated, and for 10 years I lived modestly with you, waiting to see if you loved me. David, the man. Or if you only wanted Mitchell, the billionaire. You've answered that question definitively. Claire's mind reeled through a decade of memories, suddenly seeing them differently. The modest house, but David had always said she could redecorate however she wanted, and now she remembered he'd never questioned the bills. The simple vacations, but he'd always asked where she wanted to go, and she'd chosen those domestic trips herself, wanting to save money. The quiet dinners at home, but he'd frequently suggested restaurants, and she'd declined, thinking they couldn't afford it. As for you, Bradley, David's voice turned colder. My Princeton roommate, the man I considered my brother. I've known about your affair with my wife for 6 months. Every promotion you received in that time, I authorized it personally. Every raise, I approved it. That corner office you're so proud of, I gave it to you. Bradley's confident facade had crumbled completely. David, I can explain how you seduced my wife while cashing checks from my company? Explain how you fed her lies about who I was, knowing the entire time that you worked for me? David's laugh was bitter. I have recordings, Bradley. Every conversation where you mocked me to Claire. Every planning session for tonight's announcement. Your office has been monitored for months. The screen shifted, showing text messages, emails, recorded phone conversations. Claire watched in horror as her affair played out in high definition for 200 guests. Her words, her complaints about David, her cruel mockery of his supposed inadequacy, all of it exposed. "I loved you," David said, his voice finally showing emotion. "I loved you enough to give you 10 years to see me. Really see me. Not my money, not my status. Me. But you never did. You looked right through me every single day." Tears streamed down Claire's face. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of humiliation and rage and crushing realization. Bradley had known. He'd known David owned the company. He'd played her, used her, probably for his own advancement. "Bradley," she whispered hoarsely, turning to him. "You knew?" Bradley wouldn't meet her eyes. "Claire, I figured if we just waited until—" "He's been sleeping with my executive assistant too," David said flatly. "Jessica Tanner. They've been together for 18 months, longer than he's been with you." Another screen flickered to life, showing Bradley and a stunning brunette in intimate embraces, time-stamped and dated. Claire felt her world tilting sideways. David walked slowly toward her table, and the crowd parted like water. "I'm divorcing you, Claire. My attorneys will contact you tomorrow. You'll receive the standard settlement. Nothing more, nothing less. The prenuptial agreement you signed holds up perfectly, especially given your adultery. You'll leave with exactly what you brought into this marriage." "David, please!" Claire's voice broke. "As for you, Bradley," David turned to his former friend, "you're fired, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the premises. I've also contacted every major firm in your industry. Your career is over. You'll never work in corporate finance again." The two men in suits lifted Bradley from his chair. He struggled weakly. "You can't do this. I'll sue. You'll do nothing," David said coldly. "I have proof of corporate espionage, misappropriation of company resources, and fraud. If you'd like, we can settle this in court, where I have unlimited resources and you have none. Or you can disappear quietly and I won't press charges." Bradley's face collapsed. He was led away without another word. The ballroom had fallen into complete silence. 200 people watched as David returned to the small stage. "I apologize to all of you for the disruption of what should have been a celebration," he said with quiet dignity. "Please enjoy the rest of the evening. The bar remains open, and I've arranged for the band to play. I hope you'll forgive this unfortunate necessity." He walked off the stage and out of the ballroom, leaving Claire sitting alone at the head table, her champagne silk gown suddenly feeling like a costume, her borrowed diamond bracelet burning against her skin. The morning after the anniversary gala, Claire woke in the guest bedroom of the suburban house she'd always despised. David had left before dawn. She'd heard his footsteps, quiet and measured as always, at 5:30. The house felt different now, each modest room revealing secrets she'd been too blind to see. She walked through the home with new eyes, the kitchen with its simple granite counters, but the appliances were all Sub-Zero and Wolf, brands she'd barely registered. The living room with its comfortable furniture, but now she noticed the paintings on the walls were original works by artists whose names she vaguely recognized from gallery openings she'd refused to attend with David. The backyard with its plain wooden deck, but it overlooked 3 acres of carefully maintained gardens that must cost a fortune to keep. "How did I miss all of this?" she whispered to the empty rooms. Her phone had been ringing since 6 a.m. Her mother, her sister, her friends, all of them had seen the videos that had somehow leaked from the gala. Of course they'd leaked. David had probably ensured they would. The humiliation was now public, permanent, viral. A knock at the door made her jump. She opened it to find a woman in a crisp business suit holding a leather portfolio. "Mrs. Mitchell? I'm Jennifer Walsh from Davidson and Associates. I'm representing your husband in divorce proceedings." Claire had expected this, but the reality still felt like a physical blow. "Come in." They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where she'd eaten 1,000 unremarkable dinners, never knowing she was married to a billionaire. Jennifer opened her portfolio with practiced efficiency. The prenuptial agreement is quite clear, Jennifer began. Given the documented evidence of adultery, you're entitled to a settlement of $500,000 and no spousal support. $500,000? Claire's voice rose. He's worth $8 billion. The prenup was signed willingly by both parties. It includes a morality clause that specifically addresses adultery. You're fortunate, Mr. Bory. Mitchell isn't contesting the settlement entirely. Jennifer's tone was professional but cold. He's also agreed to let you keep your personal vehicle and any gifts he gave you during the marriage. Claire thought of the modest jewelry, the occasional handbag, the car, a nice Lexus, but nothing extravagant, nothing that hinted at the wealth David possessed. I want to speak to him, Claire demanded. Mr. Mitchell has made it clear he has nothing further to discuss. He's moving forward with an expedited divorce. Given the circumstances, we expect the proceedings to be finalized within 60 days. After Jennifer left, Claire sat alone in the silent house. She pulled out her phone and searched for David Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Global Enterprises. Hundreds of articles appeared, most from business publications she'd never read. She clicked through them, piecing together a picture of the man she'd been married to for a decade. David had founded Mitchell Global at 26, just months before they'd met. A brilliant financial mind, the article said, a reclusive genius who shunned publicity and ran his empire from the shadows. Worth billions but lived modestly, eschewing the trappings of wealth. Known for his philanthropy, though he insisted on anonymity. Respected by peers, feared by competitors. She found their wedding announcement in the New York Times, a small notice she barely remembered. But now she saw it was in the society pages, not the regular announcements. Someone had known who David was, even if she hadn't. Her phone buzzed, a text from Bradley. We need to talk. This is your fault too. Claire stared at the message. Anger finally breaking through her shock. She'd been played by both men in different ways. David had tested her and she'd failed. Bradley had used her and discarded her the moment things went wrong. She typed back, "Lose my number." Then she blocked him. Over the following days, Claire learned more about her husband from strangers than she'd learned in 10 years of marriage. News coverage of the Gala scandal had exploded. Financial reporters analyzed David's business empire. Social media dissected every detail of the exposed affair. But through it all, David himself remained invisible, just as he'd always been, hiding in plain sight behind the persona of a simple accountant. 1 week after the gala, Claire received a delivery, a thick manila envelope with no return address. Inside, she found photographs, hundreds of them. They showed David at charity events she'd never known about, cutting ribbons at hospital wings he'd funded, shaking hands with senators and celebrities. Each photo was dated, spanning their entire marriage. On the back of each one, in David's neat handwriting, was the same note. I asked you to come with me. You always said no. Claire's hands shook as she flipped through them. She remembered those evenings now. David would come home and mention some event, some dinner, some gathering, and she'd always dismiss them. Just work functions, she'd assumed. Boring accounting conferences? She'd sent him off alone, never curious about his life outside their home, while she'd stayed behind and texted Bradley. The final photograph in the stack was from their wedding day. David's face was radiant with joy, his eyes on her as she walked down the aisle. On the back he'd written, "The moment I decided to spend the rest of my life proving you could love me without my money, I was wrong." Claire wept then, but not for the lost luxury she'd never known she'd had. She wept for something far more devastating, the slow, crushing realization that she'd had everything she'd ever wanted, and she'd destroyed it with her own hands. 3 weeks after the gala, Claire stood in the lobby of Mitchell Global Enterprises for the first time. The gleaming tower stretched 60 stories above downtown, its architecture stunning and modern. She'd passed this building 100 times, never knowing her husband owned it. "I'm here to see David Mitchell," she told the receptionist, knowing it was futile. "Mr. Mitchell doesn't take unscheduled appointments." "Do you have—" The woman paused, recognition dawning. "Mrs. Mitchell?" "Not for much longer," Claire said quietly. "Please, I just need 5 minutes." The receptionist made a call, spoke in hushed tones, then shook her head. I'm sorry, Mr. Mitchell's assistant says he's unavailable. Claire had expected this, but she'd had to try. She turned to leave, then stopped. Can you give him a message? Of course. Tell him, Claire's voice caught. Tell him I finally see him now. She made it to her car before the tears came. She'd spent the past 3 weeks in a fugue state, watching her life dismantle piece by piece. Her friends had abandoned her, unwilling to associate with the woman who cheated on a billionaire with his best friend. The scandal had made her unhireable. She'd been a marketing consultant, but no company wanted to touch her now. The suburban house was already on the market. David was selling it as part of the divorce settlement. Her phone rang, an unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Hello, Mrs. Mitchell, this is Thomas Brennan. I'm calling from the Mitchell Foundation. Claire's stomach tightened. I don't want David's charity. This isn't charity, ma'am. Your husband established a trust in your name 9 years ago. It's been accruing value this entire time. As of today, it's worth approximately $12 million. Claire nearly dropped the phone. What? Mr. Mitchell's instructions were specific. The trust was to be revealed to you only in the event of divorce. It's yours free and clear, regardless of the prenuptial agreement's terms. He wanted to ensure you were taken care of. I don't understand. Why would he? Mr. Mitchell loved you, ma'am. The trust was created to protect you, even from yourself. Thomas paused. He also asked me to give you a message if you ever came to the office building looking for him. What message? He said, I watched you choose Bradley over me every day for 2 years. I watched you look through me, past me, around me. I gave you a decade to see the man I was, and you never did. The money is so you'll never be desperate, never be vulnerable, never need to rely on anyone who might hurt you the way I've been hurt. But it will never be enough to undo what you've lost, because what you've lost wasn't billions. It was someone who loved you completely, exactly as you were. Claire sat in her car in the parking lot of Mitchell Global Enterprises, staring up at the tower that reached toward the sky. Somewhere up there, David was working, building, creating, living the life he'd always lived, the life she'd been invited into but never noticed. The $12 million felt like an anchor rather than a gift. She would never struggle financially now. But the money emphasized exactly what David's message said. She'd lost something infinitely more valuable than wealth. She'd lost a man who'd loved her enough to live 10 years as someone else, just to know if she could love the real him. And she'd proven, definitively, that she couldn't. The divorce was finalized on a gray Tuesday morning in late November. Claire sat in the courthouse with Jennifer Walsh beside her, watching David sign papers with his legal team at a separate table. He wore a simple navy suit, no different from the ones he'd worn throughout their marriage. He didn't look at her once. The judge reviewed the documents, verified the signatures, and with a few words and the strike of a gavel, their 10-year marriage ceased to exist. David left immediately, surrounded by attorneys and assistants. Claire sat alone in the courtroom for a long time after everyone else had gone. Her phone buzzed with a bank notification. The settlement money had been transferred. $500,000 from the prenup, $12 million from the trust. She was wealthier than she'd ever imagined being, and she'd never felt more bankrupt. That evening, she drove past the suburban house one final time. New owners had already moved in, a young couple with a baby. Through the living room window, she could see them laughing together, the man bouncing the infant while the woman stirred something on the stove. Simple, modest, happy. Claire kept driving. She'd rented a downtown apartment, sleek and modern, the kind of place she'd always wanted. It was beautiful and empty and silent. She ordered takeout because she didn't know how to cook for one person. She sat on her designer couch in her expensive apartment and felt the crushing weight of everything she'd destroyed. Over the following months, she learned to live with herself. She started therapy, though she couldn't afford the good therapists anymore, and had to settle for someone who charged reasonable rates and actually listened. She took a job at a small marketing firm that didn't care about her scandal. They just needed someone who could write decent copy. She made new friends slowly, carefully, with people who didn't know her story. But she couldn't stop following David's life from afar. Not obsessively, just the occasional internet search, reading business articles that mentioned Mitchell Global Enterprises. She learned he'd donated another $1 billion to various charities, that he'd acquired 3 companies and saved thousands of jobs, that he'd been spotted at a hospital wing opening with a beautiful woman who turned out to be a cardiac surgeon. Brilliant, accomplished, kind. Claire saw photos of them together at charity galas, the kind of events she'd once refused to attend with David. The surgeon looked at him the way Claire had once looked at Bradley, with admiration and desire. But David looked at the surgeon differently than he'd looked at Claire in those final years. He looked lighter somehow, free. She'd set him free, she realized, and in doing so, had imprisoned herself in regret. 1 year after the divorce, Claire received an invitation. Mitchell Global Enterprises was hosting its annual charity gala, and somehow, impossibly, she was on the guest list. She stared at the heavy cardstock, running her fingers over the embossed lettering. Why would David invite her? What possible reason could he have? She almost didn't go, but curiosity, the same curiosity that had been absent throughout her marriage, drove her to pull out a simple black dress and make the drive to the Belmont Grand Hotel, the same venue where her life had imploded exactly 1 year ago. The ballroom was transformed into an elegant winter wonderland. Claire entered quietly, keeping to the periphery. She recognized some faces from last year's anniversary gala, saw the double takes and whispers as people noticed her. Then she saw David. He stood near the bar with the cardiac surgeon, Dr. Rebecca Santos, according to the program Claire clutched. Rebecca was laughing at something David had said, her hand resting naturally on his arm. David looked genuinely happy, his smile reaching his eyes in a way Claire hadn't seen in years. "You came." The voice beside her made Claire jump. Jennifer Walsh, David's attorney, stood there with a glass of wine. "He wasn't sure you would." "Why did he invite me?" Jennifer considered her for a moment. "David doesn't do anything without purpose. Come with me." She led Claire through the crowd to a quieter corridor. "I'm going to tell you something Mr. Mitchell probably wouldn't want you to know, but I think you need to hear it." Jennifer's professional demeanor softened slightly. "When he found out about your affair, he didn't rage or plot revenge immediately. He spent 3 days alone in his office, not eating, barely sleeping. I was worried about him." Claire felt her throat tighten. When he finally emerged, he said something I'll never forget. He said, "I wanted to give her every chance to choose me. I failed to make her happy, and I need to understand why before I can let her go." Jennifer paused. The gala, the revelation, the public exposure, none of it was about cruelty, Claire. It was about truth. He needed you to finally see him, even if it was too late. "I do see him now," Claire whispered. "But what difference does it make?" "That's not for me to say, but he wanted you here tonight for a reason. Wait here." Jennifer disappeared back into the ballroom. Claire stood alone in the corridor, listening to the music and laughter from the gala. Minutes passed. Then David appeared, walking toward her with that familiar measured stride. They stood facing each other, two people who'd shared a decade of life and knew each other not at all. "Thank you for coming," David said quietly. "Why did you invite me?" "Because I wanted you to see this." He gestured toward the ballroom. Mitchell Global donated $3 billion to various charities this year. We've funded cancer research, built schools, provided clean water to developing nations. None of it will ever have my name on it, because I don't need recognition. I just want to make a difference. "David, I'm not telling you this to make you feel worse, Claire. I'm telling you because I want you to understand something." His eyes met hers and she saw no anger there, no bitterness, just a profound sadness. "You were right that I didn't give you the life you wanted. You dreamed of galas and penthouses and recognition. I could have given you all of that, but I chose not to because I wanted something impossible. I wanted you to love me without any of it." "That's not fair," Claire said, her voice breaking. "You should have told me. You should have trusted me. Would it have made a difference? If I'd told you on our wedding day that I was wealthy, would you have loved me or my money?" David shook his head. "I already knew the answer, Claire. I'd seen the way you looked at successful men, the way you talked about your friends' husbands who provided luxury. I wanted desperately to be wrong about you. I gave you 10 years to prove me wrong. And Bradley. Bradley was my test, though he didn't know it. I promoted him, paid him well, made sure he was visible and successful. I watched to see if you'd notice him, if you'd be drawn to what he represented. David's voice remained steady, but Claire heard the pain beneath it. You proved exactly what I'd feared from the beginning. Claire's tears fell freely now. I'm so sorry. I know you are. I believe your remorse is real. David reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. This is why I invited you here. Read it later. Not now. What is it? Closure. For both of us. He glanced back toward the ballroom where music swelled. I need to get back. Rebecca's probably wondering where I disappeared to. Are you happy with her? The question escaped before Claire could stop it. David's smile was sad but genuine. She knows exactly who I am. She's known from the first date. She loves me for my mind, my values, my goals. The money is irrelevant to her. She's a successful surgeon in her own right. We're building something real together. Everything I should have done. Yes, David didn't soften the truth. Everything you could have done if you'd ever really looked at me. He walked away, leaving Claire alone in the corridor with the envelope. She didn't open it there. She left the gala, drove home to her apartment, and sat on her couch with trembling hands. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper. David's handwriting covered it, neat, precise, measured as everything about him. Claire, I'm writing this letter to release both of us from the prison of what might have been. You've spent the past year in regret, and while I won't say you don't deserve that pain, I don't want to be the cause of your continued suffering. Our marriage was doomed from the beginning, not because of money or lies, but because we wanted fundamentally different things. You wanted a certain kind of life, visible, exciting, full of status and recognition. I wanted depth, authenticity, connection. Neither of these is wrong, but they were incompatible. I don't hate you, Claire. I pity you because you traded something real for something that was never real at all. Bradley used you. I loved you. The tragedy is that you couldn't tell the difference until it was too late. The money I've given you, the trust fund, the settlement, is not meant to ease your conscience or buy your forgiveness. It's meant to free you to become whoever you're meant to be without the burden of desperation driving your choices. Use it wisely. Build a life that makes you genuinely happy, not just one that looks impressive. As for me, I've learned my lesson. I'll never hide who I am again, not from anyone who matters. Rebecca knows everything about me, my wealth, my past, my scars from our marriage. She loves me anyway, not despite my flaws, but including them. It's what I should have demanded from you, what I should have insisted on from the beginning. This is my final communication with you. After tonight, we'll have no reason to interact. I hope you find peace, Claire. I hope you learn to see people for who they truly are, not what they can provide. And I hope someday, with someone else, you'll experience the kind of love I tried to give you, the kind that exists without conditions, without tests, without secrets. I forgive you for what you did, not because you deserve it, but because carrying that anger was destroying the man I'm trying to become. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It means releasing you to your own life and myself to mine. Goodbye, Claire. I hope you build something beautiful. David Clare read the letter 3 times, each pass revealing new layers of meaning. David's forgiveness was somehow more devastating than his anger had been. He'd given her freedom, closure, and the truth. All the things she'd failed to give him during their marriage. She folded the letter carefully and placed it in a box with the few other mementos she'd kept from their marriage. Then she sat in her silent apartment and let herself feel the full weight of what she'd lost. Not the billions she'd never known about, but the man who'd loved her completely and received nothing in return. The crushing truth settled over her like a heavy blanket. David had won, but not through revenge or public humiliation. He'd won by becoming everything she'd once dreamed of finding in a partner. Successful, principled, generous, strong, and showing her that she'd had it all along, but had been too blind to see it. 5 years passed. Claire built a quiet life. Not the life she'd once dreamed of, but a genuine one. She ran a small marketing consultancy, worked with nonprofits, learned to find meaning in contribution rather than status. She dated occasionally but never seriously. The men she met seemed diminished somehow, and she knew why. They were being measured against a standard she'd only understood after it was gone. She followed David's life from a distance, watching him build his empire and his family. He and Rebecca married in a private ceremony. They had 2 children. Photos showed them at charity events, always together, always comfortable with each other, in a way that made Claire's heart ache with recognition. That could have been her life, should have been her life. She heard about Bradley occasionally through mutual acquaintances. He'd moved to a smaller city, taken a job in insurance, married someone quickly. The stories suggested he was unhappy, diminished. David's prediction had been accurate. Bradley's corporate career had ended the night of the gala. On what would have been her 15th wedding anniversary, Claire received an unexpected package. No return address, but she recognized the handwriting on the label. Inside was a photograph, the one from their wedding day that had been in that envelope 5 years ago. But this time, there was no note on the back. Instead, there was a new photo included. It showed David and Rebecca at a hospital wing opening, cutting a ribbon together, their children beside them. On the back, in handwriting that wasn't David's, must be Rebecca's, was a simple message. He wanted you to know he kept his promise. He built something beautiful. We hope you have too. Claire stared at both photographs for a long time. The young David in the wedding photo, eyes full of hope and love. The older David in the recent photo, eyes full of peace and contentment. 2 versions of the same man. One she'd destroyed, one she'd freed to become who he was meant to be. She placed the photos on her mantle, side by side, not as shrines to what she'd lost, but as reminders of what she'd learned. She'd spent 10 years married to a billionaire and never noticed. She'd had everything and recognized nothing. The crushing weight of that truth had reshaped her entirely. Some lessons come through joy and growth. Others come through devastation and regret. Claire's lesson had come through the second path, and its weight would never fully lift. She'd learned to see people truly, to value substance over surface, to recognize love when it was offered. But all of those lessons had come too late to save the one relationship that had mattered most. She'd wanted to marry a billionaire, and she had. But she'd been so busy looking for one that she'd failed to recognize him standing right beside her, patient and hopeful, waiting for her to finally see him. By the time her eyes had opened, he'd already walked away. That was what David had done that crushed her forever, not the public humiliation or the financial limitations or even the divorce. What crushed her was the gift of clear vision that came too late to matter. He'd forced her to see him, really see him, at the exact moment when seeing him could no longer change anything. And that truth, that she'd held everything in her hands and let it slip away through her own blindness, would follow her for the rest of her life, a weight she'd carry as penance for the love she'd been too blind to recognize until it was already gone. She'd wanted to marry a billionaire. She'd succeeded, and in succeeding, she lost everything that mattered.